Hello and welcome back to Crit and Crit. I'm Sint,
I'm Axion.
and we are continuing with our discussion of Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn: The Final Empire while we play through The Legend of Zelda: Oracle of Seasons. Did you just steal that?
Nope, he gave it to me for lighting his lamp.
Okay. I mean, I'm used to just going in and stealing things from people, so I mean, it's a fair question.
It is. That's why I wasn't surprised that you asked it.
How would you describe Zelda as a game overall?
For the 2D games like this, they are top-down exploration adventure games.
Fantasy, though?
Oh, definitely fantasy.
Yeah, you were talking. So, when it comes to video games, there's a couple different ways to describe them, and they both kind of fall into like different types of genre, because there's the story aesthetic, and then there's the actual gameplay.
Yep, the mechanics genre and the story genre.
And it's kind of that way too with a lot of different books. Like, calling something a fantasy doesn't really necessarily explain what the tone or anything is going to be like. So fantasy is almost more, I think, terminology for referring to set dressing than anything. Like, you know that there's going to be some sort of supernatural element at play to a greater or lesser degree. High fantasy would be that there's a lot of magic around and it's pretty readily accessible. Low magic is there's not a whole lot of magic around. But then you get into different subtypes of fantasy. Like, there's a primary world where it's set on Earth. There's a secondary world where you're in a completely new setting. Urban fantasy is basically you take a somewhat modernized setting and you have wizards running around waiting for the next bus. So there's all sorts of ways to tell a fantasy story because the genre pretty much is just something magical can happen. And the science fiction and fantasy are, I think we discussed this before back with Ender's Game, often linked very, very closely. It's just fantasy is what if we used a wizard, and sci-fi is what if a robot. Sci-fi is theoretically maybe we could build something to make this happen. Fantasy is just what if. So either way, there's stories that at the moment could not happen. It's just kind of the set dressing that will determine if it's sci-fi or fantasy, and I think science fantasy is also a pretty decently growing genre.
Yep. Basically, that's your Star Wars and things like it.
I was thinking like Gunner Craig Court and somewhat spoilers, Mistborn Era 2, which I think we'll eventually get to.
Yep, we got a bit to go, though, to get through this series.
Could also argue Avatar. Airbender, the good one, not the blue one. Because the Fire Nation being very, very steam power based makes them a lot more scientific magitech than the rest of the world. But yeah, as you probably have guessed from this conversation, we're kind of looking at how Mistborn fits into the discussion of genre, and it's kind of an odd duck in some ways. Because it is undoubtedly a fantasy. I would classify it as a very hard fantasy, in the sense that hard and soft are just how well defined your magic system is. And hard fantasy and hard magic systems are kind of a calling of Brandon Sanderson. I have yet to see one of his works that's not Wheel of Time that doesn't have an extremely detailed explanation of how the magic works. And I don't really count Wheel of Time.
I was about to say, Wheel of Times, he was working with somebody else's material.
I really wish I'd gotten to read those, but by the time his came out, I had forgotten who literally every character in the book was. So, I didn't have the will to live and go reread 11 Wheel of Time books. I think I can be forgiven for that. But yeah. Mistborn is very much a hard fantasy. It is a secondary world fantasy set on the planet of Scadrial. And we know it's very unlike our Earth because, well, it's mentioned several times throughout the story that ash is falling from the sky, the sun is red, and Vin finds the idea that plants could be green as absolutely absurd. So, very, very, very different from what we have. Why are you tormenting this walrus?
I think it's a person in a robe.
Why are you tormenting this Mythbuster?
Well, I'm not tormenting them, I'm following them. But every time they spot me, they freak out and go back to the starting area. So I have to stay hidden.
How the heck does that count as being hidden? You jumped on a platform!
I have no idea, but I'm gonna take it.
Yes, let me stand on this stage so you may see me better. Okay, that happened.
I found a swirly thing.
Alright, it's a very, bleak world. There's a very, very clearly defined caste system. You are either noble or you are ska, which is the word for peasant/slave, because they are basically treated as such. Even those who are not technically enslaved have a pretty meager life. And they are thoroughly, thoroughly put down by the Lord Ruler, the God Emperor with unfathomable power. There are some who wish to rebel against it, but overall, most just keep their head down because overwhelming odds, etc., etc.
Yep. Beaten down, can't imagine a better way. No hope, etc., etc., etc.
Yep. And the caste system is very rigorously enforced, as we mentioned with the plot discussion, because the magic of allomancy is largely hereditary. So they want there to be zero chance of the underclass being able to gain access to these magical powers, because if you know how to use them, they are broken as heck, especially if you are lucky enough to be a Mistborn. In fact, the entire world basically runs on the metallic arts. It's mentioned that people have to be very careful about wearing metal if they expect there to be a Misting or a Mistborn around. The economy is based on atium, one of the rarest elementic metals that there is in existence. So, yeah, the magic system is actually pretty integral to the world as a whole, not just there's the world and also there happens to be magic sometimes. It is very thoroughly built into the system. And that kind of makes it actually really easy to bridge into other aspects of genre, because we have our fantasy set dressing. Where would you expect the story to go, just knowing we have this empire and we have a big city?
Well, I would expect some kind of urban fantasy nonsense. Some focus on the society and the people and the associations between them. Oh, I just did a big old loop. Basically, kind of what we get.
Kind of. But, well, we know we have an evil empire. But do all fantasy stories necessarily set out to overthrow the biggest bad guy there is?
Not necessarily, but it's common enough that if you begin your story with there is an evil empire, it's not an unrealistic expectation that by the end of the story, the empire is going to fall or be irrevocably changed.
Or we can subvert that, which we can talk about when we actually get around to that book later. I actually don't know if you know which book I'm talking about.
We'll get to it when we get to it.
Okay. Yeah, But honestly, when it comes to fantasy and overthrowing an evil overlord, the one that comes to mind, and I'm pretty sure is the one that codified the whole thing, really comes back to Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So you have like an epic adventure where you have to travel long distances to take care of this and gather your allies along the way and swear a pact, etc., etc. And we don't get that in Mistborn. We don't have a long-told prophecy telling them that this is the chosen one who shall come to us. We kind of do, but that's actually already happened and it didn't work out so well. The chosen one of legend, as far as everybody believes, turned into the Lord Ruler. Well, we know that that's not exactly how that happened, as we discussed in the plot episode, but that's kind of how you would expect something like this to go down. Like in Lord of the Rings, you have, well, we have the ring, so we need you to go take care of this, Frodo. And we have like, Harry, you were born on this date, which means you're going to be the one who has to kill Voldemort. But we don't have any sort of, like, narratively chosen one in the case of Mistborn. Instead, what we have is a hired band of thieves. Because Sanderson decided that he wanted to have his novel about overthrowing the evil emperor as a heist. We don't necessarily have an altruistic band of do-gooders who just want what's best for the land here. We have a bunch of con artists, thieves, and a few other people who actually are here, you know, like, they're here to do a skill and they believe in the cause, but they're doing it because they're getting paid. This is a hired job for them. It isn't necessarily a passion project, though for some of them it undoubtedly is. And that does kind of shift the tone of things. For one thing, they're all they already, with the exception of, like, Vin, they already know each other very well, so Vin just has to catch up on, basically, the dynamic with everybody else. But they're all already innately comfortable with each other, they generally know how to work with each other, they know how to work around Kelsier, let's just be honest there. Because Kelsier knows how to work around them. And, well, it generally makes for, I think, a more lighthearted and almost flippant tone compared to, we must go on an epic quest and throw the ring in Mount Doom. And I personally find that a lot more enjoyable.
It's certainly very entertaining.
It also means that you can, just like with any other, like, archetypal story, you can have a nice, easy niche for people to fall into. Like, with the traditional hero's journey, like, you generally have, like, the hero, the lancer, you have the smart one, you've got... I'm basically proving I have spent way too much time on TV tropes. I'm not even looking at it right now, and I already know this. And then, like, the odd one out who kind of just brings everybody together. So, obviously, you have, in this case, Kelsier is the mastermind behind everything. The plan is his. He's going to be setting up, here's what we need to accomplish, here's how we're going to do it. Especially considering that Kelsier is not just running one job, he's using the job they're being paid for to kind of handle the job he actually wants to do. The job he, you know, hasn't bothered to tell anyone in his crew about. But, yeah. So, the easiest one for me to go to when it comes to a heist is Ocean's 11. Which I actually haven't seen in years, but you have a group of people who all want to get in and do this thing. So we have a guy in charge, it's his plan. We need a distraction. Well, we have a bunch of people on our crew who can work as a distraction, especially considering Kelsier and Vin are OP as heck. We need somebody to be a spy on the inside. Well, we have a few of those. We've got Vin infiltrating the nobility, we've got Lord Renew infiltrating the nobility, we've got Marsh infiltrating law enforcement. We have 3 spies. It actually works out pretty well, because only one of them gets caught. You got Ham as your muscle, because he's the thug. He can make himself a lot tougher. Yen's the one paying for everything because, well, heists are kind of expensive, especially when you're trying to infiltrate the nobility and need to look the part. You've got your social guy with Breeze, who literally just, that's what he does. Even when he's not using his soothing powers, he is working every crowd for all they're worth. You've got their lookouts with Spook and clubs. They keep everybody aware of trouble and make sure that people can't find them. You've also got Dox, who's up there with Kelsier as far as coordination goes. So yeah, you have a pretty solid and well-oiled machine for various criminal happenings. It's just the fact that the job they have been hired to do is completely off the wall insane.
Which, the members of Kelsier's group are not shy about telling him at several points that we can't believe you roped us into this, and similar comments.
Yep. So let's just break down the problem. That's actually our best asset, is we can break this down. So you see, we just need to cause a house war, destroy the economy, recruit an army, and kill the Lord Ruler. See, only 4 things we have to do.
And I know that last one is the one that's bothering all of you, so don't worry about that one. I'll handle it.
Morgan Freeman voice. He does not, in fact, handle it.
I mean, he sort of does, in the sense that he puts Vin in a position where she can deal with it.
I guess. But it definitely does change the way you read the story. Once you know, like, yeah, it's a fantasy, so you get your mind to accept, okay, there will be magic, there will be these other things that I can't necessarily explain. But knowing it's a heist as opposed to, say, a political thriller, or a romance, or a mystery, knowing the genre that the visual story is structured in really changes your expectation. Because you kind of get used to how that story is supposed to go. You see them putting out most of their plan. You see them having setbacks. You see them actually trying the plan. And this one's a little bit odd because usually you get to see, like, hey, here's your kind of wind down where you get to see the aftermath of whether the plan succeeds or fails. And we basically end, like, immediately after the Lord Ruler withers into nothing because we have extra books for the aftermath because there are gonna be consequences.
Yep. You don't do things like the group did and not have there be after effects. And the group, even to some degree, expects this. They're talking about making plans for what they're going to do in the aftermath of their house war and how they're planning to keep things running once the various noble houses that normally handle that stuff are out of the picture or otherwise occupied. Which is something any smart group of people planning any kind of political upheaval should be wanting to do. And Elend comes in near the end and makes the point of, if you want to have these vast changes in society, you have to, know when to tell your troops to back off versus when to press the advantage.
Yep. So, probably should bring up Kelsier's other con, because while the rest of the group was pretty sure the job was literally just, we need to go raise the army and give them a chance to take out the Lord Ruler, Kelsier's idea was, I'm going to steal your worship. I'm going to set myself up as a martyr to give them the hope to continue on the revolution, and also give them a focus other than the Lord Ruler as potentially their god.
Yep, especially for the Ska. Because the Lord Ruler is very much the god of the nobility. According to what everyone believes throughout the course of the story, the nobles are nobles because they were the people that helped the Lord Ruler during his great quest that ended with him becoming a god, or a fragment of a god. We find out, of course, later in the story that that's not 100% accurate, due to some of the comments the Lord Ruler himself makes. But the entire idea of the Lord Ruler's faith and following is prioritized towards the nobility and used as a means of keeping the Ska under control. And by contrast, Kelsier's first his rebellion and then his actual faith that he creates are made for the Ska to give them hope and purpose beyond their otherwise sordid existence as pawns and possessions of the Lord Ruler's favorite nobility. Yay, I get a free shovel.
I can dig it. But yeah, you even have, like, in the middle, things go horribly wrong when Yen jumps the gun on taking the army out for a test run, costs them most of their soldiers and their advantage of surprise, and they still manage to pull it off, if only because Vin and Kelsier are insane.
And because the group as a whole are intelligent, resourceful, and capable people. It's, yes, there is a lot to be said for their special capabilities, but the group...
Oh, I just meant the whole, like, I'm gonna go make myself a martyr. Cool, I'm gonna go ride that momentum and just go charge into the freaking palace. So yeah, the rest of the group saves their butts because they're super competent. Okay, it saves Vin's butt because they're super competent. But it's still like, hey, this is an insane plan. I'm gonna go do something insane. Like, I'm not even talking about competence at this point. I'm talking about literally, we're making bad choices that just happen to work out for us. You know, in typical Dungeons & Dragons fashion.
I was about to say, as you do.
Okay, look, we only incited a war with the violin once. That was fun.
It was.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what else to add here.
Me neither, honestly. I think this is pretty much wrap this particular subject up.
Alright, until next time then.
See ya!